Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. And for those who are joining us now, welcome to the MSCA 2020.HR video conference, MSCA Actions, Impact and Future Challenges. We've had an action-packed morning and we have a great program this afternoon. We will be discussing through two panel discussions how to achieve more balanced brain circulation and mobility between different European countries in the MSCA, and how to ensure that different countries participate in a more equal way in the MSCA and other framework programs of the European Union. And in our panel later on this afternoon, we'll be talking about the issue of what challenges will be facing early stage researchers in the next decade, and how we can best prepare early stage researchers for those challenges through development of new skills, and generally just making sure that they are more ready for the challenges that they'll be facing in their careers. And in addition to this, we'll have a chance to watch our 3 remaining MSCA award finalists, and you will be the ones, as our audience, deciding which of these finalists will be awarded the MSCA award. So please feel free to look at their projects in the expo booths that you have on your platform, and to press the vote button for the finalists that you believe are the best in that category. For those of us who are rejoining us after being here this morning, welcome back, and great to see you again. We have it's Friday afternoon, so obviously we're very grateful you're taking this time to take part in our conference. I hope you have a good cup of coffee next to you, and that you're ready for a few hours of really great content. So what is following now is our third panel discussion, and it's a panel discussion based on a theme that we've been already addressing this morning. So we're coming back to it, which is basically the inclusiveness of the MSCA and other framework programs, and how to ensure a more balanced brain circulation. So we all know, and this was discussed this morning, there's a divide in Europe in terms of research and innovation performance between different European countries, and which is also linked to the different levels of participation in research programs, framework programs and others. And this hinders a balanced circulation of knowledge and diversity, and an equal spread of excellence throughout Europe. So what we're going to do in this session is to address the need for an increasing level of participation in these programs from around Europe. And what we'll try and do is really think about how we could address this issue. And what we have is we will have 3 speakers who will each present their perspective on this issue from different points of view. So we'll have 2 MSCA fellows and 1 representative of the Ministry of Education. So let me give a quick introduction to who our speakers will be, and then we'll ask our first speaker to give their presentation. So our 3 speakers on this panel will be Dr. Tanja Vučković-Juraš, an MSCA fellow, Mr. Filip Tietz from the Ministry of Education, Youth and Sports of the Czech Republic, and Dr. Maria Gorna, a board member of the Marie Curie Alumni Association. And the first of the speakers will be Dr. Tanja Vučković-Juraš, who was awarded a PhD in sociology from Indiana University, Bloomington, in the United States. In 2016, she received the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Individual Fellowship, and this brought her to Belgium, to the Interdisciplinary Research Center on Families and Sexualities at the University of Louvain-la-Neuve, where she conducted her research between 2017 and 2019. And she's currently serving as the editor-in-chief of the Croatian Sociological Review, the official journal of the Croatian Sociological Association. So, Tanja, good afternoon. Good to see you again. And when you are ready, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to this panel on enabling inclusiveness and participation. My name is Tanya Vučković-Juroš, and in my contribution, I would like to focus on two issues. One is Parenthood Penalty, and as this is an issue that still overproportionally affects women, so it's mostly a motherhood penalty, and this is why this is an issue that is very important for gender balance. The second issue is penalty that is experienced by non-heterosexual researchers, and in my presentation I will focus on those with families. And this is the issue for geographical spread of excellence. My perspective here is informed by two things in particular. One is my own position. I started my own MSCA fellowship as a young mother with a child that was 3 years old and a baby that was 6 months old. And also my research was examining transnational families of LGBT migrants, so the issue of same-sex families was something that I became very much connected to. Let's start with the gender balance issue. So if we start from the numbers, we see that in terms of female doctoral graduates, balance is achieved of sorts. These numbers are EU averages. However, if we go a bit further into the data, some issues arise that show a picture that is less balanced. And some of the issues that are related to that are the fact that most female researchers, after their PhD stage, are also in the stage when they start having children and they're starting their own families. So one of the dimensions that you see this gender imbalance is the dimension of mobility, where men are much more favored in terms of international mobility rates than female researchers. As we all know, gender balance, gender dimension is something that is very important, is this MSCA's Skłodowska-Curie schemes. And there are many, many good strategies already in place there that are already trying to address the issue, and the fact that there are still fewer female applicants applying for these mobility schemes. However, some issues remain. I'm gonna highlight some of the issues that were highlighted by other current and previous fellows that shared their stories with me through Facebook page that gathers fellows. So of course this is a convenient sample, but let me assure you these stories are not out of the ordinary. So, and they highlight some important points that we have to consider. So the first issue I would like to discuss is the needs of parents, researchers who are parents, that go beyond the family allowance. So currently family allowance is one of the instruments that is intended to alleviate, to mitigate the family obstacles to mobility. But as you can see from these three stories, the issues go beyond just financial support. And one of the big issues is the lack of provisions and support for childcare from the host institution. So the first story highlights how often that fellows often have to travel earlier before the fellowship starts on their own expenses to find childcare. And this is particularly problematic for those who are coming from poorer countries and who find this financial challenge. The problem that accompanies this is that fellows, you are usually not familiar with the childcare facilities and childcare regulations in the country of destination. So that makes things very difficult, and when they are not able to find good and affordable childcare, or frequently the burden then falls on their partners, and sometimes that means that partners will be kicked out of the labor, as the third story illustrates. The second issue is the financial issue. This is also very important. At this moment, the amount of family allowance is fixed. That means that everybody gets the same amount, no matter whether they come with a partner, with one child, or with more children. And childcare, especially if you're coming to a country at short notice and you don't know the regulations, and you're not able to find affordable childcare, can get very, very expensive. And then additional dimension is here when you do not have a support of a spouse or a family member who travels to a foreign country with you. So balancing childcare, fieldwork, research, everything becomes much more difficult and much more expensive. And the COVID-19 situation has dramatically made this more difficult. The final point is the crucial point. That is the fact that although the Marie Curie fellows do have a right to extend their fellowship during the duration of their maternity care, they are not guaranteed that this maternity leave will be paid. So this is left to the regulations of their host institution, of the host country. Frequently, eligibility requirements work against mobile searchers, so they do not qualify for the benefits of the paid maternity leave. And there is not sufficient information available for fellows on how to transfer their rights from one country to another, if this is possible. And sometimes the responsibility is pushed towards the fellows because there is no provision in place by the host institution on what to do when the fellow is not eligible for paid maternity leave. And sometimes, as the case presented here, the fellow was pressured into giving up the research money to pay for the maternity leave. As you imagine, that is very detrimental for the success of the fellowship and career chances of the fellow. So after talking about Parenthood Penalty, I'm gonna also talk about non-heterosexuality penalty, which is related to the issues that the removed families, the same-sex families who are mobile within the European Union are facing today. And these are related to the fact that there are very big differences between countries in terms of regulations and protection of same-sex families. This picture you see here ranks countries in terms of marriage, partnership, and parenthood protection. And if you look at the bottom of the countries that give very few or no protection or recognition of same-sex families, you will see there is a great overlap with widening countries. So this has a very clear implications for the geographical spread of excellence. So all the issues that we mentioned before in terms of how difficult it is to balance a mobility fellowship with family are amplified here by all the additional problems that arise through a lot of additional expenses and the lack of legal protection or equal benefits for members of same-sex families, from tax regulation to lack of health insurance for the partner if they are not recognized as a partner, and all the many other issues on which we could spend hours talking, but we don't have time for that. So I will finish my presentation with main points, with main highlights. So still, there are many financial and practical obstacles for parents within these schemes that are detrimental for gender balance, which discourage pursuing career-enhancing international mobility and may lead to female researchers opting out of pursuing them at all. When they do pursue these options, parents, mothers are disproportionately burdened, which may negatively affect successful implementation of their fellowships. And finally, the extra obstacles, the extra challenges faced by researchers with same-sex families are very detrimental for geographical spread of excellence, because they discourage from applying in certain countries, and that further exacerbates the center-periphery imbalance. So these are structural problems. These are not individual problems. And as such, they cannot be the responsibility of researchers themselves or of the goodwill of the host institution. They must be addressed within the fellowship scheme itself. Thank you. This is all. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vučković-Juraš, for your excellent presentation, because it adds such an interesting new dimension to what we were talking about. So in the morning, we were talking about this, let's say at the European level, different participation rates from different countries. So the kind of the national versus EU disbalance between different countries within Europe. And you've added this perspective of the demographics and about the gender dimension, and also other issues such as LGBT participation. And this adds a whole other level of to what extent these programs and to what extent mobility and brain circulation generally is inclusive and participative. So, and I like the fact also that your presentation really links nicely the different elements we were talking about. So it was talking about the different levels of participation between the center and periphery. So you mentioned all those elements, but also you linked into what we heard in the previous panel from Dr. Munir Sharav about these the working conditions and the importance of support for work-life balance, and that we can't just look at researchers as resources for excellence and innovation. They are human beings who need support and who need mental health support, who need childcare support. And we have to look at all those different aspects. So thank you very much for opening those questions. We'll come back to those in the discussion. And I'd like to invite our second speaker today. And our second speaker is Filip Tic, who is from the Ministry of Education, Youth and Sports of the Czech Republic. He graduated from the Faculty of Law at Charles University in Prague in the Czech Republic. He has worked at the Ministry of Finance in the EU department, in the Ministry for Regional Development, and in the Ministry of Education, Youth and Sports, linking to European structural investment funds and in programs related to research. Since 2016, he's been responsible for managing calls for mobility of researchers at universities and research institutions in the Czech Republic, especially MSCA individual fellowships. So, Filip Tic, welcome to our conference, and we're looking forward to hearing the perspective of the Czech Republic and your own personal experience in addressing these issues of participation and inclusiveness. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for the invitation to this conference and for the introduction. So my name is Filip Tic. I work at the Ministry of Education, Youth and Sport of the Czech Republic in the Department of Management of Operational Program, Research, Development and Education. And I would like to present you our goals which help the researchers to implement their MSCA projects as another chance to implement their projects. It's for Czech researchers or Czech host institutions. I would like to present you the main objectives of the calls, activities, then differences between conditions of international mobility in operational program and under the Horizon 2020. And at the end of the presentation, I would like to present our results of this course. We have already 4 calls in this field. So the calls for international mobility of researchers, MSCA, IF, which is their name, support the researchers which have been, or the projects have been evaluated very well after above 70%, but didn't get money from Horizon. So they can put their projects to the course of from operational program. It's only for individual fellowships, and the application has to contain such projects as was set in MSCA, including same host institutions. Eligible activities in our calls are support of MSCA projects arrivals to Czech Republic, and another activity is for departures from Czech Republic. Both activities can go together with a support tool, which is to align work and private life of researchers. It's the same as in MSCA or the family allowance. The activity includes scientific research, stays of employee of the beneficiary. This is the mobility. The duration of the mobility has to be between 12 and 24 months. Is the same as in MSCA project. But for activities, departures from Czech Republic, there is a mandatory return phase specified. The return phase must take at least 6 months and relates to individual mobilities. Following the completion of the return phase, the researchers must prepare some kind of activity report in the return phase. The report must include a description of activities performed by the researchers during the return phase. Among other, the description should focus on the transfer of experience gained during the mobility into the beneficiaries' organizations and dissemination of mobility results through the arrangements of seminars, workshops, etc. The activity report will also include information regarding the ratio of the performed economic and non-economic activities in the return phase. It's because there has to be some impact of the projects of the operational program to Czech Republic or to researchers in the Czech Republic. There are some excluded activities which is not possible to do in this course. As I said, the course is only for individual fellowships, or global fellowships are not. The global fellowships are forbidden. In terms of rules with state aid, there is a forbidden secondment if there is some in not in research organizations but in private entity, and in terms of rules of double financing, there is teaching commitment. Now I would like to thank you some differences between conditions in operational program and in Horizon 2020. The projects in this course are financed as a unit cost, when 1 unit is 1 month of mobility as in MSCA, but it's not so obvious in projects in operational program. So we had to negotiate the unit cost and the amount of money in this unit cost with European Commission, with DG Regio. and we had to fulfill their conditions and then conditions from Horizon 2020, conditions from operational program rules and national rules. So that's why there are some differences between the projects in MSCA and operation program. The first differences is that only eligible applicants in operational program should be research organizations, which are under the definition of the framework of fostered aid in research and development and innovations, and they have to be based in the Czech Republic. So not only researchers can submit an application, but the application has to be submitted through the some research organizations. Then there are in operation program there are some rules with co-financing, so the project has to be the co-financed by the beneficiary. It's approximately about 5% of the amount for the project. Then other differences that cost is based on seniority, junior and senior researchers. That means that junior has a lower unit cost than a senior researcher, and junior researcher is till 7 years after getting PhD, and senior researcher is older than 7 years after PhD. Through the whole mobility, the researcher must be employed by the applicant or beneficiary institution for the entire duration of the mobility. So when there is a departure from the Czech Republic to some host institution in abroad, the researcher is still employee of the Czech organizations. And as I said before, for activities departures from Czech Republic, mandatory return phase must be implemented. And there is one thing I don't have here, but only one project application should be submitted by the one organization. So when there are more than one application of MSCA, they have to get them together and submit as one project in operational program. Another mandatory activities, like differences from the Horizons rules, is that the researchers must participate in some conference, seminar, workshop, etc. At least one in every 6 months of mobility, and there is a difference between arrivals and departures. In arrivals mobility, the participation has to be active. For eligibility of a unit cost, the researcher has to submit an activity report, which is a document that must be prepared once a month during the entire duration of the mobility, and it includes description of work in a given month, declaration of non-economic activity performance. It's because the state aid rules are different in Horizon and operational programs. Then if there is some interruption of work, it should be including in the activity report, and total working time in a given month. The activity report is a part of the project implementation report and serves to document the performed activity units. Only this activity reports gives the eligibility of the unit cost. Now I'd like to share with you our results from our calls. First call for this type of mobilities we prepared in year 2017, and in this call should be submitted the mobilities from MSCA from years 2015 and 2016. There were 16 projects awarded, which means 47 mobilities in total allocation almost 6 million euros. Next year, 2018, was 4 projects from MSCA 2017. Then again, 17 projects were awarded. These 17 projects was fulfilled by the 36 mobilities, and the money was something above 4 million euros. In year 2019, it was called for the projects from MSCA 2018, 20 projects awarded with 39 mobilities, in total allocation 5 million euros. For this year's, the call is still open until the end of August, so we still wait for the submitting projects. Next year, we don't think they will be the same call because of finishing of the operational program, but now we negotiated the new operational program for the new programming period, and we hope that we will continue with this call, so the researchers will still have the second or third chance to finance their project if they will be very good evaluated and they will not get money from Horizon. So this is all from me. I thank you for attention. Goodbye.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tietz, for that detailed overview of what the Czech Republic is doing to support mobility of its researchers related to the MSCA and to supporting those with great projects and that need additional funding. So that's a very important example of a good practice of how member states who need to increase research mobility can have a range of financial measures in place to support young researchers. So I'd like to move on straight away to our next speaker, Dr. Maria Gorna, who is on the board of the Marie Curie Alumni Association. She obtained her PhD from the University of Cambridge as a Marie Curie early stage researcher, after which she worked for 5 years as a postdoctoral fellow at CEMM in Vienna. In 2015, she returned to her homeland of Poland with the Marie Curie Individual Fellowship and founded her own research group in structural biology at the University of Warsaw. Maria is also a laureate of the EMBO Installation Grant, the Fulbright STEM Impact Award, and several other national funding programs. So Dr. Gorna, welcome to our conference, and we're looking forward to hear your perspective on how to increase the inclusivity and increase participation in mobility programs at the European level. The floor is yours.
Hello, my name is Maria Górna. I'm a group leader in life sciences at the University of Warsaw. and I was a board member previously of the Marie Curie Alumni Association. I will be talking mostly about problems as I perceive them in the widening countries, and from the perspective of a person who both left Poland because of Marie Curie actions as a PhD student and later returned to Poland with an individual fellowship in the first round of Horizon 2020. And as a young group leader, I participate a lot in discussions of how we can do science better in Poland. And I've been also struggling myself to build a research group that would be more international and to obtain EU funding. So I hope that the concerns that I have will be relevant also to other researchers. Well, let me start by maybe redefining the hypothesis that we are addressing in this discussion. I will not be using numbers and graphs because I believe this has been addressed in previous panels and discussions, and I will probably reiterating some problems and observations and solutions that were stated previously. First of all, we believe there is a problem with the research quality in widening countries, as this may be seen by the lower number of grants related to excellence in research, such as ERC or the Marie Skłodowska-Curie individual fellowships. And of course, this might be due to differences in the application rate and the success rate. And we also have perhaps publications with less impact as judged by lower citation numbers. And this is a complex issue because this itself, the publication system, might be affected by a poorer recognition of laboratories and researchers residing in the widening countries. And there might be also a gap in the private sector. In my area of research, I see fewer companies that have their own R&D laboratories, and that could contribute to a bit more efficient innovation in Poland. And a second kind of problem is the mobility of researchers. We see the brain drain, so there are many outgoing fellows, and we see a low internationalization level, which is seen by fewer incoming fellows. And of course, these two things are interconnected, both the research quality and mobility of researchers. And next, I would like to look at the causes behind these symptoms. And here I listed a few, I tried to structure a few types of obstacles that I myself have considered while planning to return to Poland. Some of them are, let's say, less possible to solve quickly because they are on the country level. Things such as economy or GDP will not be altered easily, but the amount of funding on the national level for research is lower, for example, in Poland than in an average EU country. And because of our economy, our salary and benefit levels might not be as attractive. And something that in my field of research is relevant, it seems to me that research consumables that we very often import from abroad cost us more than in the EU 15 countries. So there's a disparity between the amount of funding we get and the amount of money we have to spend on research. Things such as political climate might be a especially delicate issue, for example, for certain ethnic backgrounds or the LGBT community. And but I will not address these right now. And finally, something that is very often confusing to people incoming to widening countries, and especially in my case in Poland, is that the structure of the higher education system for researchers who work in academia is not very transparent, and there is such thing as the habilitation degree that prevents us from being able to be the direct supervisors of PhD students when we come in. So that's something that I see more as an obstacle, but it's an ongoing discussion in Poland, of course, if we need this or not. And certain procurement and employment laws should be simplified in order for the research to work more smoothly. For example, hiring of researchers and obtaining consumables that are for research only. And something that might be a bit more easily addressed is what is done at the institution level. My biggest problem right now is the administration and burden, for some also teaching burden. So this is connected to the job stability. If we work in academia in Poland, we are expected to teach as a sort of the equivalent of the tenure track. There are no stable jobs for research-only positions. And in general, even excellent researchers employed from grants are not promised a longer-term employment. So that's something that is really a key issue. And of course, some of the lack of success in obtaining grants might be because we have insufficient training in grant writing. And finally, there might be a language barrier at the university or another institution that supports an incoming researcher. And this is the case, for example, for my foreign postdocs in my group. And finally, things that every researcher struggles with is our individual track record and the so-called quality of our CV, which is judged by publications and maybe some mobility periods as well. And that is to be addressed individually, of course. However, all of this is especially a difficult issue for researchers who have been in widening countries and did not have access to good collaborative networks, good opportunities for example, joint work with excellent labs abroad, and who have not been exposed to good examples to follow. And perhaps there is a lack of a local community that supports each other and, I don't know, provides excellent lectures and access to good expertise in our research fields. And good examples to follow might include, for example, researchers who already obtained ERC grants, and some of the national initiatives will address that. And I just wanted to say I'm a big fan of the already implemented initiatives when it comes to my Skłodowska-Curie actions. And these have been mentioned before. These are the widening fellowships, which as a sort of top-down approach lets more funding and more fellows and all of this research quality to flow back to our countries. And the seal of excellence. However, that one is more up to the individual institution or country, how much they will make use of it. And so it's only useful for proactive organizations. And the Net4 Mobility Network has been a great example how the NCP network is contributing more and more towards training, for example, of prospective applicants. And our own Marie Curie Alumni Association is a great network to build bottom-up collaborations to meet other like-minded researchers. And I think it's sort of a very useful support for all kinds of grantees, also past the period of the MSCA funding. And I wanted to give a few examples of what has been done in Poland. And some of these initiatives I also have used myself, and I find them very attractive. For example, our Ministry of Science and Higher Education has launched a few programs that would complement the funding that is already provided by the European Commission. One of them was IDS Plus. If a researcher has submitted ERC proposal that was evaluated to a very high level but didn't obtain funding from ERC, they could apply for this IDS Plus program and they would get part of this project funded so that they can at least, for example, do preliminary research, and that would let them launch this research program. That has been great. I myself would have applied for it had I achieved a greater score in my ERC proposal. But I have used the other program that they offer, which is Premia na Horyzoncie, sort of like a premium on the horizon that would provide additional salary at a fixed 20% of the European grant that can be used to complement any deficiencies in salaries, either for the fellow or maybe even for the administrative staff that is supposed to help them. And I'm a big fan of EMBO, installation grants. This is a European scheme by EMBO that to which each country provides funding to have a few incoming fellows that will start their own research groups. This is in life sciences. However, this is a great example how in yet another way country can invest money to use already existing evaluation systems, and they get for free really good evaluation systems that they can ranked fellows to which they can just simply provide funding. And we have a new National Agency for Academic Exchange, ANAVA, which provides two types of grants. And this is maybe the first time I've seen it that they split the funding for incoming foreigners who are not Polish and separately for returning Polish citizens. And this has been a good idea, and it's something that might be a little bit compatible level to the salaries provided by my Skłodowska-Curie actions. And I think likely applicants apply for both. And the National Science Center, our main basic research funding agency for researchers in academia, provides grants that let you visit a laboratory abroad of an excellent researcher who obtained BRC grant so that you can learn from them and maybe even adapt some of the practices that they use. And finally, we know about MSCA co-fund schemes. There are some, of course, also in Poland, and some of them are run by the National Science Center. And however, I know of at least one co-fund that was not in the end implemented because the institution did not want to provide its own money as the co-financing scheme. So it is a bit tricky even in Poland. Finally, my university, as the biggest in Poland, has decided that they will award 3 Seal of Excellence fellowships for the proposal that's scored highly in MSCA individual fellowship call. However, I would say three of them might not be enough for an institution that employs more than 7,000 researchers. And finally, we have the National Center for Research and Development that is awarding mostly money for applied research and SMEs. And I'm not aware of anything that an incoming researcher from abroad could use right now to facilitate a career that might be more a little bit in connection with the private sector. And that is a little bit sad, and where I see a missing gap. To summarize these, I would say that there are certain concerns when researchers are applying for grants that would be based in a widening country. And one of the biggest problems is maybe how attractive these countries are in terms of the funding level. And in my case, I would really stress the importance of good administrative support from the institution and the career prospects that we would have after starting our career or launching this career period in a widening country. And for the researcher, it's really important that once you do obtain the grant, that its implementation is easy, because we know from certain studies done, for example, in the US, is that it's not the first grant, but the next one that usually divides performance, for example, between men and women who are applying for grants. And of course, the training and support in writing proposals, especially in such competitive schemes as ERC. And I would like to suggest, on behalf of discussions we had in MCAA, that there would be more flexibility needed in the criteria, in the evaluation criteria for grants that would be implemented in the widening countries, because very often researchers choose these countries at a different stage of their career. So the scientific age criteria should not be applied here, because the majority of researchers that I know that returned to Poland or came to Poland have done so for family reasons. And family concerns only kick in after we had our mobility period around Europe, and usually they are more important at the point where we want to settle. So I believe widening countries are very often chosen as a destination where the fellows want to settle with their families. or for the career development, not necessarily family only. And finally, to enable a better quality of research and innovation, I think it would be necessary to bridge this gap between the EU15 and EU13 countries, for example, and that might be done both by building collaborative networks, and I think cost actions could be more useful here than they are right now, because they're not as well advertised, for example, to researchers at my level, and I wouldn't know even how to access them. And to invest to give an incentive to EU15 to invest in consortia with EU13, I think I really like the measure suggested in the future to hop on the consortia that are already existing, and this way learn how to work in a consortia and how to run this type of EU grants. And something that I've seen at my university also is a European university scheme where 6 universities join together, and they also offer some mini grants and funding to build for common projects with some universities based in the Western Europe and some in the widening countries. And finally, from a perspective of a person who works part-time for an SME, I would like to say that in order to build excellence hubs where the private and public sectors can cooperate for more innovation, I think there should be less restrictions for SMEs in the widening countries when it comes to the regional versus more developed parts of the country. Right now, I see that there are quota assigned to the developed regions, such as the capital, and the SMEs existent there are not eligible for certain funding. And I think it's a little bit premature to prevent centralization of funding in widening countries, since even the central excellence hubs have not yet perhaps seen enough funding and enough capacity. Thank you for listening. That is all from my side.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gorner, for your perspective on the issue of inclusivity and ensuring more participation in the MSCA and generally in other research programs. So at the end, what we've seen through this panel and through various ones, that it's now quite a complicated picture. So we're looking at the one hand, EU-level measures that should be addressing these issues and the issue of lower participation of certain countries, national measures that should be carried out to also address those same issues. Universities and research organizations have their own potentials and to address these issues themselves, and also individual researchers can be doing many things themselves. So it's at a range of different levels. And what we saw from our previous discussion is that there were talks at the EU level to simplify procedures to ensure better access to different programs and to synergize different programs. And that's been a very interesting one, which I'd like to come back to now. But before we start that discussion, our first presentation in this panel opened up a whole new dimension about the whole gender perspective and perspective of participation and inclusivity from a different perspective, not just different countries participating, but who within those countries, what researchers are excluded or included in the process. And maybe then an initial question for you, Dr. Skłodowska-Curie, is in our earlier discussions, we said, okay, it's a complicated problem, but what are the quick wins that we could have, this is a long-term problem. Gender inequality is a long-term problem. Inclusivity is a long-term problem. But if you had the opportunity to propose some quick wins that could be done in the next 1 or 2 years that could address some of the issues that you brought up in your presentation, either to the European Commission or to even to national policymakers or even to universities, what would they be?
The easiest thing is information. So we heard earlier a good practice of a welcome center for the fellows. So if there is structured, comprehensive information that is available to everybody who is coming, which routinely gives information about childcare, for example, childcare, transferability of benefits, all these issues that people need to know in order to manage their lives. This can be easily done just by organizing the information and providing it easily to the fellows. So this is the most easier and the most quickest thing to be done, and it would not solve the problems, but it would make many things much easier for the incoming fellows.
Thank you very much. That was a very clear response, and I would agree that that's a simple one, and that can be done without much financial resources, and that can have a huge impact. So that's a good input for the discussion. We all speakers today on this panel are from widening countries, and when in our previous discussions we were talking about, okay, what are the different ways in which to encourage more brain circulation from such countries, and also return of mobile researchers to those countries. There was talk of promoting generally this idea of internationalization of researchers, normalizing that as a normal part of academic life, of maybe having English as a kind of as a second language, or more prominent as a language within research communities, and by providing international experiences or publications as criterion within, let's say, promotion, tenure, and such like. But today we heard through this presentation an additional kind of measure, which is national ministries coming in and saying, okay, let's provide additional funding for mobility, for internationalization and mobility projects. And I mean, so I'd be curious to start with you, Dr. Godna. So would you say that's, all in all, that sounds all very positive? I mean, that sounds like a great measure. So do you have any criticism of how, is it good enough? What should be done better?
I presented good initiatives, and the only bad thing about them is that there are maybe too few grants or fellowships offered through these schemes. I would say they are in the right place, and there should just be a more quantity-wise funding available through them.
Okay, thank you for that. We actually have one question from the audience for you, Mr. Tietz, about the Czech Republic program. And the question is, are the grants that you're providing, have we understood correctly? This is a question from, Eleonora Skłodowska. Are these OP grants for those who received a seal of excellence? Or is this for other kinds of projects? If you could just clarify then, what are those grants for? Who received those grants based on what projects?
It's for the grants who received 70% or more. Not only seal of excellence, but 70%.
Okay, excellent. So it's even more inclusive than that. Yeah. So it's seal of excellence plus those who are from 70% or more. And in short, would you say that in terms of the impact or the positive impact of that program is having in the Czech Republic, and the feedback that you're getting from the research community, is there, again, support for this program and everyone's enthusiastic about it, or do people think it should be more of it, or what's the feedback that you're getting?
I think the researchers and research organizations now already knows it, and I think it's encourage them to submit or apply in MSCA if they know that if there's no money, the money is in national money or operational program money. So I think it's a good motivation for them to apply for MSCA. And they know it, and they ask us if it's still going or if it's still be continuing.
Excellent. Okay, so there's support for that program, and people recognize the value that it brings to the research community. Excellent. So did I understand, Dr. Godna, that you said in your presentation that maybe even widening countries could be attractive because I may have misunderstood this, because they're less expensive, and that could be a way of bringing in more researchers? Maybe if you could clarify whether I've misunderstood that or whether that's what you were thinking.
I would say that participating in proposals with countries such as, for example, Austria or Norway, I see that always when I plan my research component, I devote much less to salaries, or from the same amount of money, I can fund more research team members. It's also a bad thing because it means we are sort of cheaper workforce. But for running a research grant, it might be something beneficial. However, even though our purchasing power for example, money, when you take salaries in Polish zloty, it might be okay because also life might be cheaper here. Research consumables are not. Actually, I see that research consumables are often more expensive when I'm here now in Poland than when I was, let's say, in Austria or UK. And taking into account that we earn much less, and I think it's a little bit of a disparity. I would even suggest that maybe because we have to import them, and they are in euros, right? Let's say maybe we even should be given a bit bigger research expenses, allowance than typically, which might be absurd when you think about, how much the researchers are paid. But I think that's what it is.
Thank you for that comment. I would like to ask you, Dr. Buczkowicz, you are a mobile researcher. You've been to the USA. You're now in Belgium. Under what circumstances would you return to Croatia? So what are the obstacles to you doing so, and the reasons why you would choose to opt for other research environments?
So I think we heard several times here the call of home, the emotional call of family, and that would be a very strong factor for me as well, because it is a place that I still consider to be my home. So, but obstacles that are in place, and I think that are shared not only by Croatia, but many other countries, that systems are often very closed, and there is no funding available easily, people just dropping in, or I would have to bring my own money, so to say. I would have to be competitive internationally. I would have to find my own grant that they can pay my salary in order to come back to within the system which I perceive to be closed.
Thank you. Yeah. Would you have any comments on that, Dr. Gordon? Since you did return to Poland, are you happy with that decision? And how do you see your prospects then in a country which has less developed research infrastructures than UK, Germany, or what have you?
So I would say that here we would come to the administrative and teaching burden. Since I'm employed at a university, I should start teaching even now when I'm doing research only, and I'm paid from research grants, in order to have any kind of teaching experience if I want to stay at the university. Because after that, if I cannot promise that I would always be self-funded from grants, I would have to switch to a teaching position. And this is something very difficult to balance. And of course, I could probably move to a research institute and not a university, but that is also a big decision once you have established a laboratory and the equipment is not yours, but the university. So how to find a place where you could continue without having to juggle all the kind of obligations that come with being part of academia, and university in particular.
Okay, thank you very much for that comment as well. Again, that's another kind of obstacle to ensuring return in a way to such countries and to such research systems. We have one more question, I think, from the audience. No, it's in fact the results of our poll for this panel, which we asked the question to the audience: do you think that MSCA actions in the context of access to research infrastructure and to collaborative networks is inclusive enough? And in fact, 37% said a lot, it's very inclusive, but 50% said it's only moderately inclusive, and 13% said not enough. So in a way, the majority are not very enthusiastic about how inclusive the MSCA actions are. So I think that does say something about aspects that could be improved. We've now reached the end of this session. I don't think we have any more questions from the audience. And I'd like to thank you for joining us today, Mr. Dietz, Dr. Vučković-Jurić, and Dr. Gorna, for your perspectives on how we can address these issues of inclusivity and participation in the MSCA. And thank you for your contributions, and we will see you later. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Welcome back. And we are now reaching the third category of our MSCA awards, which, again, as a reminder for those who may be joining us this afternoon, we're awarding MSCA awards today to finalists who've proven just demonstrated the impact that the MSCA has had on their research career. And we are awarding three types of awards, and this third category that we're presenting now is about MSCA fellows who've proven and demonstrated how this has had an impact on intersectoral or interdisciplinary work through their mobility and through knowledge transfer. So the finalists in this category are Tuce Martegan for the Opto-Bioman project, David Blažević for the Entrap project, and Judith Chamorro Servent for the Colon Info project. So we'll now be showing you the videos of each of those projects, and it's up to you to vote for the project or the finalist that you think is most deserves an award in that category. So please feel free to, after you watch the videos, go to the expo booths for each of the projects and cast your vote by pressing on the vote button. You can do so until 3:30 p.m. This afternoon. And before we show you the videos, just one note for those who are used to conferences where there's coffee breaks, where you can network with other people over a coffee. Obviously, we can't do that like this because it's a video conference. However, that's why we've set up a matchmaking part of the platform, where by going onto that matchmaking section, you press a button and you magically network with someone who you don't know, and you start a conversation with that person. So what better way for some spontaneous networking than to do a bit of matchmaking via the conference platform. So why don't you check that out after you watch these videos. So, ladies and gentlemen, the videos of the three finalists for the MSCA Awards for impact on intersectoral and interdisciplinary mobility.